say why you're running, basically.
We did this at the Journal News. Would they be separate from the conversation we're having, or it's all just one thing?
No, it's all one thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm John Penny, the Community Conversation Editorial Page Editor at the Poughkeepsie Journal, and you're looking at the Poughkeepsie Journal offices. And we are here with Congressional District 18 candidates Nan Hayworth and Sean Patrick Maloney. We're going to talk for about an hour. We have a lot of issues to cover for certain. We have a lot of people in the room. I'll name at least some of them. Barry Rothfeld, the publisher, who's a member of the editorial board. Stu Shinsky, who's also a member of the editorial board, is the executive editor. Lauren Johnson, who's our social media coordinator, Chrissy Williams, who handles our camera, and Molly Salisbury, who also works for the opinion page. Sean, I just want to start with you. I always like to say we're going to start kind of slow, kind of drill down, hopefully get into some good deep issues. Why have you decided to seek this office?
Well, look, I'm running for Congress because I think Congress is broken and we need to move in a new direction. I think 2 years ago, Congresswoman Hayworth was brought in on the Tea Party wave, and look at the priorities they had. They want to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. They want to give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires like my opponent, and they want to cripple Planned Parenthood, take away all of its federal funding. I think these are the wrong choices. I'm a Bill Clinton Democrat. I worked for years with President Bill Clinton on the White House senior staff. I also ran a business here in New York. I've created jobs in the public sector and the private sector, and I think the public and the private sector working together is the way America works best. When I've been in government, that's what I've focused on, whether it was creating the Public-Private Partnership Commission here in New York to create billions of dollars of new infrastructure investing in infrastructure right here in the Hudson Valley, or as a private businessman, hiring people, creating good high-wage jobs with good benefits. We can do this, but we have to work together. Congresswoman Hayworth has had the Tea Party's priorities in Washington, and I think those are the wrong priorities for the Hudson Valley. I think we can do much better, but we have to turn the page on the partisan gridlock and division of the Tea Party in Washington. And that's why I'm running for Congress.
Okay, thank you very much. Nan, the same question. Why have you decided to seek re-election?
Well, I've had the privilege of living here and working here, establishing my practice, my own small business here in the Hudson Valley, caring for patients, with my husband raising my two sons here for the past 24 years. This election really is about the character of the Hudson Valley and the character of the people who seek to represent you. My opponent bought a home in the Hudson Valley in the spring, registered to vote here in the spring, just so that he could run for Congress. I, on the other hand, have a deep commitment to the Hudson Valley, and as your representative in Congress, I've had the privilege of visiting every one of our towns and villages and small cities, listening to the people who live here, listening to their needs. And while Mr. Maloney will think that if he could put Nan Hayworth and Tea Party together in the same sentence over and over again, he'll hypnotize you and demonize me. The fact of the matter is that the folks here in the Hudson Valley, the people I've been listening to, we're all members of the Wake Up and Smell the Coffee Party. And we know that our middle class, our hardworking people here have been buried, and I agree with the Vice President on that, by high taxes, regulations that choke our small businesses, and a rising cost of living that's making it almost impossible to afford to stay here in the Hudson Valley. It's sad to see people move out. Rising gas prices, energy prices, food prices. I'm here to represent everyone in the Hudson Valley, to work across the aisle. I'm a co-founder of the Common Ground Caucus in the House of Representatives. I work with Governor Cuomo on key initiatives like the Tappan Zee Bridge, and I'm here to make sure that working together in a positive way, in the Hudson Valley way, knowing the commitment that I have here and the roots that I have here and the understanding of this valley, I'm here to make sure that we continue working together to make this an even greater Hudson Valley for our future.
I promise both of you some of the things that you mentioned in your opening statements we're going to get to, because they're certainly on my list. Nan, I just wanted to start with you and this issue of the financial situation that the country is facing, and this question of sequestration, which will occur in January. If something doesn't change, we're facing very deep cuts in non-discretionary or discretionary spending, I should say, half of which would come from military. And these are fairly dramatic cuts. I wanted to get your take on one. regardless of who wins the election, there's consideration that there's possibilities will come up during the lame duck session of Congress, and that something would be done. Do you think something should be done, or should these cuts go forward as is? And if you would change them, how would you do that?
The important point that we have to consider here is how we create the kind of economic growth that we need to make sure that everybody in the Hudson Valley who needs a job and everybody across the country who needs a job has a job. And that was the reason that we voted for the Budget Control Act, to try to bring some sense, some common sense, the way Hudson Valley families have, into the federal budget. And because we've made a commitment, and I've made a commitment not to raise taxes, not to raise burdens on hardworking Americans. That commitment meant that when the President and the Senate and the House got together, we had the sequester put into place.
So you would keep it in place?
I would like to see our defense budget managed strategically. So we have put motions.
Can you give us a yes or no?
Yeah.
To that? Would you keep it in place?
Right now, the sequester is the law, but we certainly have to see if we can craft a solution that will allow our defense to be strategically managed, that we will not lose crucial strength for our troops, for our veterans. These are very important issues. Mm-hmm. So the key thing is that we have to have people in Congress who will be able to work across the party lines, as I have done. Mm-hmm. I was on a conference committee to make sure that the payroll tax holiday was extended for the full year. And I think we have to do that again on this defense sequester, and that's what we're working toward.
So you would tinker with it then? I'm not sure if you would
tinker with it, or would you do it? I think it's
it?
reasonable, definitely, to make adjustments, honor the budget commitment that we are seeking to have so that we can have relief, so that we can have an economy that grows.
So you wouldn't change the cap, you wouldn't change the monetary cut, but you would tinker in terms of what was cut.
Exactly. I think that's a very reasonable approach. And the key is, let's not raise taxes. Let's not raise
Sean involved, and we could stay on this for a long time. But go ahead, Sean. What's your view of this issue?
Well, the number one problem that we're facing right now is that Congresswoman Hayworth and the Tea Party have refused to even discuss asking the very wealthiest to pay a little bit more. If you take that off the table, as the Congresswoman has done, and you want to give $5 trillion in new tax cuts over the next 10 years, disproportionately for the very wealthiest. If you also want to give $2 trillion to the Defense Department, which they haven't asked for, that's the Ryan budget that the Congresswoman voted for twice, well, then you'll never get to a balanced budget. And even Congressman Ryan and Congresswoman Hayworth don't plan to balance the budget for 28 years. There is no plan to balance the budget under this Tea Party Congress. There is a plan to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare, to defund Planned Parenthood, and to give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires. Those are the wrong priorities. What would I do? Well, I would let the Bush tax cuts expire for the very wealthiest. That's number one. I would extend the payroll tax cut for another year. The Congresswoman claims now to be in favor of that, but she voted against it 6 times in her first term in office. She voted against the middle-class tax cut, the payroll tax cut, which affects 160 million Americans, 6 different times. And we all remember what happened, Congresswoman. At the end of the year, you and the Tea Party leadership wanted to shut down everything over this issue and held it hostage.
Before you address her, I just want to address the question. So you would vote against these cuts going forward? You would want this to change?
Well, there's only one person in the room who voted for the Budget Control Act.
No, but I'm asking what you would
right?
do. I'm asking what you would do.
And
we know. She said.
And I'm happy to tell you.
Yeah,
I'm happy to tell you what I would do. I think I think there ought to be a grand bargain where everything's on the table. I think, unfortunately, when you rule out any increase from those at the very top, you can't get that agreement. We did this in the Clinton administration. I mean, these guys talk about it. We balanced the budget. It wasn't that long ago.
Let me ask you something.
And there was a template for how we did that.
I have a follow-up too. You mentioned tax cuts expiring for all but the wealthy.
Right.
Where do you define wealthy?
Well, I think that at a minimum, it ought to be for folks making more than $250,000 a year and higher. But if you wanted to adjust that for regional cost of living, I'd be open to that, because that amount of money in one part of the country is not the same as in another. But the fact is that the Tea Party Congress won't even talk about it.
So 2 teachers living in Westchester can make $250,000 a year. Are they rich?
Well, what I just said is that if you wanted to adjust it regionally to reflect that, I'd be open to that. But the fact of the matter is that that's 98% of Americans, sir. So I think that if we're going to ask middle-class people to sacrifice by ending the guaranteed benefit of Medicare, the Congresswoman's proposal, by defunding Planned Parenthood, look, the Ryan budget cuts $11 billion out of veterans' benefits. So they're making a sacrifice, right? And if people like the Congresswoman and I, who've done very well in our careers and have been fortunate, what's the sacrifice we're supposed to make under the Ryan Act? The Congresswoman wouldn't ask us to make any sacrifice. I think that's wrong.
Let me just ask this question. In this question of sequestration and what might happen now, Democrats have been obviously against the Ryan budget, but where is the comprehensive Democratic alternative? The only thing that really, by de facto, it's basically saying, well, we believe in all these cuts that we're against, i.e. what's going to happen in January. Where is this comprehensive Democratic alternative? I know you're not running for the Senate, but your party controls the Senate. It's gone 3 years without passing a budget. Shouldn't it have given some type of blueprint about here's the alternative comprehensively?
Yes, I think that's right. I think the Senate should have done that. But I'm not responsible for everything that's going on in Congress. But here's what I would do. I would look to what we did that worked. I mean, we've been here before. We balanced the budget in the 1990s, and we did it without ending the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. And we did it without defunding Planned Parenthood, these mean-spirited cuts to veterans' benefits, to Pell Grants. What did we do? We asked the wealthy to pay a little bit more, you bet. We reinvented government. We cut waste and fraud and abuse. We asked the Defense Department to work smarter and more efficiently. We put everything on the table, and we grew the economy by continuing to make investments in education, in infrastructure, in technology, in research, things that are slashed in the Tea Party approach to government. And the results speak for themselves. If we had left Bill Clinton's policies in place in 2000, the national debt today would be zero.
I do want to ask you about that, and actually was my next question, but I wanted to give you a chance if you want to respond quickly to any of that, and then we'll move on because we'll...
Absolutely. If you have a small business in the Hudson Valley, and that is the engine of job growth here and around the country, what Mr. Maloney just said is that he is going to raise your taxes. Because if you make $200,000 or more, if you clear that through your business as an S-Corp, which that's what most small businesses do, you will be on the firing line. And I can tell you that what he is proposing will cost jobs here in the Hudson Valley. I've heard it. I talked with a cafe owner in Morwood, Jen, and I asked her, what can I do to help you? She said, please lower our taxes. If we could do that, I could hire more people. It's just absolutely clear. Mr. Maloney is not a Clinton Democrat. He's a Pelosi Democrat. His plan is to raise taxes. President Clinton lowered taxes. His reduction in the capital gains tax actually led to a great economic boom. It was a wonderful thing, but it was lowering taxes, not raising them. Mr. Maloney wants to raise your taxes.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second. We'll have time. Everyone take a deep breath. We're here for a while.
Yeah.
So every bipartisan commission that's looked at this, okay, says you also need to have revenue. And
That's right.
so what is concerned some people is that the Republican side seems to be infamously said during the primary, would you do 10-to-1 in spending cuts to tax increases, and they said no. So the question being, would there be any deal that would enhance revenue that you would support? Moreover, you mentioned you mentioned in your opening that you work with Governor Cuomo.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Governor Cuomo, truth and fact, as he'd been in office, did cut a deal that did raise taxes slightly on the people making the most money, but it also eliminated 80% of the MTA payroll tax on small businesses. Mm-hmm. It got us money for flood insurance. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, and it closed a budget gap. Mm-hmm. So would you have not made that deal when it had all those benefits, but it was going to raise taxes slightly on richest New Yorkers?
Well, the real point here is that the positive way to grow revenues, which I agree with, we have to raise revenues. It's true. We have a budget that needs to be managed. We have a lot of important things we have to do, including save Medicare and Social Security for our seniors now and generations to come. And the way to do that, the way to grow revenues, is to put people back to work. Let our businesses grow. And the way you grow businesses is by lowering taxes, making them flatter and fairer, lowering regulations that don't make sense. We have far too much
So you
regulation.
wouldn't accept a deal like that?
I would accept a deal and this is on behalf of all the hardworking people in the Hudson Valley and across the country. I would accept a deal that made our tax code flatter and fairer, reduced the kind of regulations that are crushing our businesses across the Hudson Valley. I know because I've talked with them. And reducing credit availability. I talked with a small businessman in the village of Florida in Orange County who said he can't get a loan now because the regulators, with Dodd-Frank, are so hard-pressed on the banks that they won't loan to people they know. This is not the way to grow business. We need to loosen those regulations, and we need to activate our domestic energy production. We need to build the Keystone Pipeline. We need to activate the offshore leases that we already have.
Okay.
And that would let business grow. That would put people back to work, and then they'd make their contributions to the work of government. That grows revenues.
Okay. You have a question?
Well, look, I mean, the Tea Party has been talking about balance the budget, but they've never done it. Congresswoman Hayworth's never balanced the budget, and the Tea Party sure hasn't either. I was part of the team that did, both in the Clinton administration and in the governor's office. We did it every year. And here's what you do. You cut waste, and you cut fraud, and you cut abuse, and you eliminate programs that aren't working, and you look at everything very closely. I'm all for that. But you also have, if I could just finish there, you also have to have some openness to what makes sense in terms of living within your means as a government. Now, when Bill Clinton raised taxes on the very wealthiest congresswoman, he did it without a single Republican vote in 1993. George H.W. Bush did the same thing in 1990 because there used to be Republicans that believed in doing what works, and those are the kind of Republicans we need back in Washington that I'm happy to work with. But if someone says you can never raise taxes on the very wealthiest, ever, under no circumstances, then you will not do what we did in the 90s. We raised taxes a little bit, just a little bit, on the very wealthiest families, and the Republicans said the sky was going to fall. And what happened? We created 20 million new jobs, 800 good jobs right here in New York, and we balanced the budget and ran record surpluses. That works, and we kept investing in our kids. We kept investing in our communities, in our environment. We didn't end Medicare. We didn't defund Planned Parenthood. We can make better choices, but you've got to have your eyes open. You know, it's not the wake up and smell the coffee party, and I'm not the one calling the Congresswoman a Tea Party, or you called yourself a Tea Party candidate many times.
And we want to actually get into that label at some point, but Stu, did you have a question?
Just
you
a quick question.
Quickly?
What percentage, Sean, of credit would you take for that balanced budget? You've brought it up several times in this debate, on the YNN debate and the other debates. What percentage of that credit do you take personally? Not Bill Clinton, not Gore, but what percentage do you take personally for that balanced budget?
Oh, well,
what was your contribution?
As you're talking about me versus Bill Clinton?
You're the candidate.
Obviously, I was a member of his staff, sir, and proud to be it. And just like any staff member, I had very little to do with it compared to what the president did.
Were you an architect or one person on a team?
I'm obviously one person on a team, but I was on the White House senior staff, sir, and I saw the president every day for 3 years, and I was in the room when he made a lot of those choices, and I was with him this week, and I'll take his word for it.
What strategic idea did you contribute to the team that made that balanced budget happen? What was the top strategic idea that you contributed?
Well, that wasn't my job, sir. My job was to prepare the briefings for the president every day. I was the White House staff secretary. The White House staff secretary is the person who prepares the president's briefings and is a neutral broker, because I read everything the president reads and talk to the president about it on a daily basis.
So as the staff secretary, you're taking credit for balancing the federal budget?
Listen to me. I'm saying that the Clinton team got it right, and I'm proud to be a part of that team. And if your point is that those of us on the staff didn't have as much to do it as the president, you're right, we didn't. His name was on the ballot, he got elected. But some of us learned something from that, and you know what we learned? We learned that there's things that work and there's things that don't. What doesn't work is what the Tea Party and Congresswoman Hayworth have been doing, trying to shut down the government, trying to end Medicare, going after Planned Parenthood, right? Voting against the payroll tax cut for middle-class people while trying to give $5 trillion in tax cuts to multimillionaires like herself. So if you ask me what team I'm on the Bill Clinton team.
Sean, I want to say this just for a second, because during the debate you said that if we had, you talked about the surpluses that were being created during the Clinton administration and said if we would have kept going that way, we would have eliminated the deficit. But I found that to be a pretty provocative thing to say.
Well, the debt, actually, not the deficit.
The debt. Okay, excuse me. And that's very provocative, because since then we had 9/11, we've had the mortgage meltdown, we've had the financial crisis. Are you calculating all that into this equation that gets us there? Or I was trying to figure out beyond
2 wars also.
Exactly.
Yes, that's right.
So how do you figure that?
Well, here's how I figure it. If we just paid for everything that came after, if when we fought 2 wars we paid for them instead of borrowing the money from foreign countries to do it, which was wrong, if we had asked a little sacrifice of people at the very top, like the Congresswoman and myself, we could have paid for those as we went. We didn't need to put those on the country's credit card. We passed a huge prescription drug benefit, which a lot of us support, but we didn't pay for that either. The folks in Washington thought we could put that on the credit card. And I think that when the recession hit, and we can talk about what caused it, I think a lot of it was caused by the regulators being asleep at the switch. But the fact of the matter is that if we had just paid for the things we did, if you had given these tax cuts and paid for them by cutting other spending, or if you hadn't done them, which I think would have been more prudent, especially after 9/11, if we had paid for the wars we fought, and if we had asked all of us to sacrifice together as a community in a time of national crisis, then we would be a debt-free country today. Instead, we've been smoking this dope of we can keep giving huge tax cuts, that somehow it will magically create revenue, and we've been hearing that stuff for 30 years, and we've been getting deeper in the hole every time we tried it. We know what works. We've done
I want
it.
to switch gears pretty soon, but go
I
ahead.
have one
Yeah.
question. So if the tax proposal came down, if the grand compromise came down, and instead of the proposal landing at raising taxes on people at $250,000, it was at $1 million, would you support it?
Every time we raise taxes, we take dollars out of the active economy. And that's the fundamental problem here. We have, President Obama said it himself, and I'm happy to agree with the President on this. January 2010, he said, in a bad economy, you just don't raise taxes. The reason we had the boom that we did under President Clinton was because he lowered taxes. He lowered the capital gains tax, and that was a really conspicuous help. It was before Mr. Maloney's service with him. In fact, President Clinton subsequently expressed regret that he had raised the income tax rate, because when we allow those dollars to remain in our economy, and we're talking about small business, this is the engine of growth. We're talking about hiring and jobs. If you want to have an objective source, look at Ernst & Young. They just issued a report saying that the tax and fiscal cliff we're facing, but especially the tax cliff, when a raft of new taxes is going to hit us, taxes that Mr. Maloney supports, in January of 2013, our economy will shrink. We will lose 700,000 jobs. Right now we have an unemployment rate of 8.9% in Orange County. And we all know, and I commend Governor Cuomo for having made some very smart moves to bring New York's fiscal house in order, but we all know this is a state with high taxes and heavy regulations that have driven businesses out. We suffer disproportionately in this
But
kind of
Congresswoman, one of those agreements included raising taxes on the highest, richest New Yorkers. That is the fact. I mean, you're crediting them with something that's saying that you wouldn't do on the federal level, and I'm trying to figure out why you see that difference, particularly when you're making the point that New York is already has a high tax.
Well, what I'm saying is that we need to heed the needs of our economy. And it's been proven time and again that when you raise taxes, when you raise regulations, when you do the kind of things that were done and planned out in the last Congress under Speaker Pelosi, you're going to have a problem with the economy. I hear from our small businesses and our larger ones that taxes and regulations are killing job growth. We see it in an economy that is not moving. We have an economy that's hit stall speed. We need to have investment in enterprise. That's why I voted for the Jobs Act, that actually lets small businesses ease the path to having more investment. This is a very important issue. It's crucial. We have got to stop raising taxes and regulations on the American people.
Just move on just a little bit. We had the benefit of having you in, I don't know how long ago, X amount of months ago, for an editorial board meeting. Mm-hmm. And I asked you at the time.
It was the spring.
It was the spring. And I asked you, what would you look back as your biggest accomplishments for the district itself? And the first thing that you said was holding a job fair, mm-hmm. and the second one was your work on the tropical storm cleanups. Mm-hmm. What would you say to a constituent out there who said that, granted you haven't been in office that long, but to say that a job fair was the biggest thing that you did? It wasn't a private partnership that actually created jobs. It was a job fair to get people the possibility of getting jobs. what would you say to someone that just doesn't seem like enough to them?
Well, first, constituent service is a crucial component of what we do as a congressional office, and knowing the Hudson Valley as well as I do, and I'm privileged to work with a team of people, all of whom, of course, are based here and have grown up here, lived here, invested here, raised their kids here, had their lives here. It's very important to heed the needs of our constituents. We do that in ways that are small and larger. And one of those ways was, of course, to have 2 jobs fairs. We brought together about 2,000 local residents with over 100 local businesses, all offering jobs. And indeed, people did find jobs through those jobs fairs. When we sped relief to our district after Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee, I was the first member of the New York delegation to call on President Obama to ask him to grant full disaster relief. I'm a co-chair of the Common Ground of the Hurricane Irene Coalition, which brought Democrats and Republicans together from the affected districts to cooperate and make sure that we could bring attention to the problems faced by our local governments, by our private citizens, and by our farmers. $90 million have flowed into the district for repair of our roads and bridges based on that work. That's direct help. I've also worked tirelessly to try to lift those burdens that are impeding hiring and growth here in our Hudson Valley. It's very important that we have relief from taxes and regulations and high energy prices. So I've been working every day that I am in Washington. When I'm there, I'm working for this district.
Sean, you have a quick response to that?
We have
ask you a question.
Yeah, sure. Look, folks, we have a record, right? We don't have to listen to rhetoric. There's a record. And the record is that when Hurricane Irene hit, and when Orange County especially was very, very seriously damaged, Congresswoman Hayworth went on record saying that we needed to cut the budget before we funded FEMA. That was a Tea Party position. Now, she denies it now, but it was reported at the time. And just today, in another local paper, there's a story documenting how you, in fact, said that at the time. And other Republican elected officials thought it was outrageous, because it is outrageous. Because when a hurricane hits, it's no time to be worrying about budget cuts. There's 430 some odd other members of Congress who could have done that. That was the wrong choice. And look, I hear this wherever I go. If I go up to Hopewell Junction, I talk to Deborah Hall and the folks there who are trying to get clean water and clean air, a Superfund site. They say they can't get any help from Congresswoman Hayworth because she's so busy down in Washington doing other stuff. And look, if you talk to Jim Taylor, a job creator, a Republican in Orange County, who wants to put 300 people to work tomorrow at a waste-to-energy plant, creating good renewable energy jobs in a part of the Hudson Valley that really needs them, he says Congresswoman Hayworth is, quote, killing us. She's killing small business because she won't lift a finger to help them. She thinks the government has, no role to play. I think that's crazy. I want to help small business. I want to listen to people in the Hudson Valley, and I won't be serving some Tea Party ideology in Washington.
Okay. Well, do you want to respond to this FEMA cuts? This has been reported that the view was Republicans had said that, well, you need to offset with other budget cuts.
I have my record will tell you the story. Hurricane Irene Coalition co-chair, fighting for every dollar of relief we could bring to the Hudson Valley.
Are you saying that you never said, even initially, that there should have been? Are you saying
when
you
I
never
had that
said?
Conversation, right? I had that
conversation
conversation with a reporter from the Times Herald Record, and what I said was that the relief is the priority. Do we have a federal budget? Yes, we do, and relief has to be a key part of that budget. Not hold the relief, no, provide the relief. Provide the relief. Yes, manage the budget. Subsequently, provide the relief first, always. That got turned into a different story.
Okay.
But the real story is that I voted consistently for every allocation of relief dollars to FEMA in every single budget we had to make sure that we met those needs. But if you look at my voting record, you can see it right there. And again, why would my colleague, a Democrat, because I do work across the aisle, that's what I should be doing, and my colleague, a Democrat, Peter Welch from Vermont, made me a co-chair of the Hurricane Irene Coalition so that I could be an effective advocate. He knew I'd be an effective advocate for our farmers, for our communities, for our individuals. I was on the road the night of the hurricane, visiting all of our emergency centers. I was on the road the very next day viewing the damage, and every day thereafter, making sure that wherever we could provide the help and bring attention to these problems and make sure that we were coordinating with FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Environmental Conservation here in New York State, that we did it.
Okay. Real quickly, and I want to move on.
Yeah, look, when anybody tells you that they later voted the right way or they joined a caucus or a coalition or one of these, this is Washington speak for I did something that you don't understand and didn't see in your community. Here's what happened. What happened is the storm hit, and the Tea Party folks in Washington thought that we shouldn't fund FEMA the way it needed to be funded to help our communities until they cut the budget somewhere else. They're so obsessed with this Tea Party ideology. And Congresswoman Hayworth, I am disappointed to say that you supported that. You said last week that they misquoted you, and then the Times-Herald Record said, well, here are the quotes. No, we didn't. I mean, George Green, the conservative town supervisor of New Windsor, said you were playing politics with people's homes that were being destroyed. He's no liberal. This isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue about whether this obsession with cutting the budget and with never talking about the wealthiest paying a little bit more, because you heard the Congresswoman a minute ago rule that out. We can never have the wealthiest like the two of us who've done very well. We can never make any sacrifice for our country, but we can vote against the payroll tax cut 6 times the way the Congresswoman did. Okay. We can deny help to folks like Jim Taylor.
I want to move on a little bit. You've mentioned Tea Party, I don't know how many times already in this meeting, and in the other debates you did too. I was curious. Are you aware of the National Journal's ranking of Congress folks? And Nan has been rated 220 out of 435 House members in terms of her conservative voting.
Right.
So one, I want
right.
let me ask
sure.
a question. One, are you aware of it? And 2, do you disagree with the methodology that was used, or the methodology that was used with it, or do you?
Well, I don't know why that should mean anything to someone who lives and works here. Here's what should mean something.
What it would mean to someone is that these are the people that are scoring votes, actual votes.
Right.
That would
let's look at.
Hold on. You asked the questions. I'm going to provide an answer to our readers. Okay. It's okay. No. Absolutely. And we've done a lot of listening, and we're going to do a lot of listening. But these are the people. This is a nonpartisan group that scores all these votes,
sure.
and they have her in the middle of
sure.
the pack.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, here's what I was going to say.
Sure.
What I was going to say is that let's look at the record of what Congresswoman Hayworth has supported and what are the Tea Party priorities. Now, bear in mind that in July of 2011, she boasted about being a Tea Party candidate. She gave a quote to Human Events magazine. She boasted about belonging to Tea Party organizations in Westchester County. These aren't my words. These are her words. It was more popular 2 years ago, and she's trying to run away from it now. But here's why it matters. Why it matters is that what the Tea Party wants to do is end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare, defund Planned Parenthood, cut Pell Grants, cut veterans benefits, all so we can give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires, $5 trillion more over the next 10 years. Those are Tea Party priorities. It is the Ryan budget. She has voted for it twice, and in fact she voted for the most severe version of these cuts in the first Ryan budget. And H.R. 1, which she supported, had all those Tea Party priorities right in it, including defunding Planned Parenthood.
So how do you suspect that she ends up in the middle of the pack on this voting, on this overall vote? How does that happen?
I have no doubt that there are other parts of the country that have congresspeople that are even more extreme and more conservative than Congresswoman Hayworth. But Congresswoman Hayworth, by any fair measure, is the most conservative and extreme member of the House of Representatives that has ever represented the Hudson Valley. I'll give you an example. So on environmental issues, she has a 43% score from the League of Conservation Voters. Sue Kelly had a 100% score. So even the Republican who previously represented this district was more than twice as good on environmental issues. Why? Because the Tea Party wants to stop the EPA from regulating coal ash. The Congresswoman supported that. The Tea Party wants to stop the EPA from regulating greenhouse gases. The Congresswoman supported that. She even denied the science of global warming, which is another Tea Party priority.
Let's get Nan involved. So what
John,
do you say
I'm a scientist. I'm a doctor. And in fact, I've always said that we have to follow the science when it comes to global warming. We also have to have balance and sustainability and common sense. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in the industrial Midwest. And believe me, I understand and value what the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act have done for our country. And I value what the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, does. So I certainly want to, and I have voted to, preserve those protections and to preserve our clean air and water and pristine lands here in the Hudson Valley. I'm a co-sponsor of the Highlands Conservation Act. I have voted for full funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And in fact, I've brought to the House a bill to protect the PACE program, Property Assessed Clean Energy, which allows homeowners and commercial property owners to make energy-saving improvements and water-saving improvements on their properties and fund them affordably through their property taxes. That's a win for the environment. It's a win for those home and property owners because they save money, and it's also a win for local contractors. It creates jobs. So this is my record. These are my votes. And in fact, I've been recognized by Conserve America and by other environmental organizations as a leader in the House of Representatives among my colleagues for my voice in behalf of the environment. I'm very proud of that. And this is a balanced, rational, sustainable approach.
Very quickly, I want to move on.
Well, then why does the League of Conservation Voters give you a failing score? And how can you say 43%? That is not passing. And you are a scientist, and which makes it all the more shocking, Congresswoman, that you told the Bedford Patch in July of 2011 that you weren't sure what the causes of global warming were, that you thought there was a scientific debate about this. You questioned whether man-made activities were causing global warming.
Okay.
And excuse me, but the votes are the votes, which are to deny the EPA authority to regulate greenhouse gases, coal ash, and pollutants in water. That is not protecting the clean air and...
Hold on. You're asking her direct question. I'm going to give her a chance. If there's anything you want to say, then we're going to move on. Okay?
Well, Mr. Maloney has himself actually taken a remarkable stand on that would increase the pollution and the carbon load from our Hudson Valley immediately, which is that he wants to shut down Indian Point. Indian Point is a supplier of clean and green, affordable, reliable energy in the Hudson Valley, as well as 2,500 jobs. Mr. Maloney wants to shut the plant, which would mean immediately that we would have more pollution here in our Hudson Valley. And by the way, I've voted consistently against the coal-burning power plants that cause that haze that we can experience on a beautiful morning here, unfortunately. He would immediately increase pollution in the Hudson Valley. People would lose those 2,500 good-paying jobs.
That's ridiculous.
And your energy prices would skyrocket. So this is the real proposal that Mr. Maloney has brought to you, and this is an environmentally and economically unacceptable
real quickly
thing.
on your Indian, real quickly, and then we're moving on.
Well, that is just ridiculous. I mean, if your number one environmental credential is that you want to keep open a nuclear power station in the middle of the Hudson Valley, then I think I couldn't make the point any better. We can transition away from nuclear energy in a responsible way, protecting the jobs and the communities that depend on it. We can do it with renewables. We got to start investing in people like Jim Taylor, who wants to create 300 jobs right across the river, creating renewable energy right here in the Hudson Valley, and that's what I would do.
Okay, we're going to move on. You've mentioned several times that your opponent wants to end the quote-unquote guaranteed Medicare benefit. I found that to be an interesting turn of phrase, guaranteed, because almost anyone, again, nonpartisan commissions that have looked at this, I mean, I like to think I'm young enough to, in an ironic twist, I'm going to get burned by this. You know, when I finally get there, there's going to be nothing left. So the question being, what guarantee are you talking about? Every commission has looked at it, looks and says this stuff is you know, we're heading some bad numbers here. We have too many people retiring, not enough money coming into the system. It's not guaranteed at all, unless we change it, right?
Well, look, the Medicare program, which a lot of folks pay into, right, which you pay into out of your paycheck every week, which all of us do, has been around for 47 years, and we've kept that promise. Now, through all kinds of wars and crises and difficult situations, we've kept that promise. The Tea Party Congress and Congresswoman Hayworth want to break that promise. It doesn't mean we don't have to get serious about bending down the cost curve of Medicare. Let's start by negotiating prescription drug prices with the big drug companies. The Congresswoman won't do that. I would. That would save billions and billions of dollars. How about we do the same thing on durable medical equipment? You know, folks, when you go to the hospital and you see on your hospital bill that your aspirin costs $10 and the shot you got cost $1,000, I mean, those things can be negotiated. When I ran a business, I ran a business. I've created hundreds of jobs. And one of the things we did was if we were making a big purchase, we negotiated a lower price. Medicare needs to do that. There's also examples of patient care where the focus is on better outcomes at cheaper cost. I think Crystal Run does a very good job of this across the river, making their whole entrepreneurial business model built around better information, fewer unnecessary tests, having digital medical records. We can get serious about bending the cost curve of Medicare. We can save money in the short term, and we should not be ending the guaranteed benefit the way the Congresswoman would, so we can give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires. That's wrong.
Okay. What is your take on this?
I'm a doctor, and I cared for patients who relied on Medicare for 16 years in the Hudson Valley. My parents are both seniors who have relied on Medicare for years, so I fully appreciate and honor the commitment we have to Medicare. I want to make sure it is there for our future. Medicare's funds are running out rapidly. The actuaries say it could be as close as 2016, and when that happens, that will mean an enormous immediate cost to our beneficiaries that they simply can't afford. Mr. Maloney is proposing some things that we can certainly look at. There's no question about it. But the fact of the matter is that Medicare faces, it's estimated, a $40 trillion hole in its funding for the future. $40 trillion. And Mr. Maloney has not told us, we have a plan.
Over what period of time is that?
Let her finish.
Over what period of time?
That's for
Let her
the
finish.
period of time that's covered actually by the responsible budgets that we've passed in the House of Representatives. And so we've put forward our plan.
I'll give you a chance to respond.
We've put forward our plan, most recently this past spring, because we face a $40 trillion hole in Medicare that we have to address with a realistic plan. What Mr. Maloney is talking about are some ideas, indeed, about information management, waste, fraud, and abuse. Should we work hard on better pricing? No question for drugs and pharmaceuticals, for medical equipment. But where do you fill that $40 trillion hole? Where is your actual plan?
Over what period of time is that $40 trillion, Congressman?
Roughly the next 30 years.
The next 30 years. And over the next 10 years, you would give $5 trillion in tax cuts to multimillionaires at the very top. So it's just about choices. I mean, the fact of the matter is if you dedicated the $5 trillion that the Congresswoman wants to give in tax cuts, mostly to the very wealthy, to the Medicare Trust Fund, you could extend the life a great long time. If we bend down the cost curve over that 30-year period, Congresswoman, then those numbers don't become reality. They become more manageable. We did this in the Clinton administration. We balanced the budget. We paid down the national debt. And we would have been a debt-free country if we were following middle-of-the-road common sense policies the way we did in the Clinton administration. Your proposal, the Ryan budget, will blow a $5 trillion hole in the budget. We will never get to budget balance, and then we will never be able to afford programs like Medicare.
Sure. Let me ask you something real quick. You mentioned your obviously your role in the Clinton administration. When we look back on the things that created the financial crisis and the mortgage mess, do you think that some of the blame could be blamed should fall on the Clinton administration in terms of when it was in office? It touted that it was downsizing. It touted deregulation. It touted some of the changes to investment banking at that point. Some of this started under Reagan. It clearly continued under Clinton, and so forth. What would you put any percentage of the problem on the administration that you were in?
I think any fair person would say that there's plenty of blame to go around for everybody, and that it's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. That things were done wrong. But here's where I would put the most blame. I would put the most blame on the subprime mortgage originators who are selling products that never should have been on the market. I would put the blame on the banks that were repackaging these things into toxic assets. I would put the blame on the rating companies that rated them AAA when they should have been rated as junk.
And the Glass-Steagall change that happened at the end of the Clinton administration was one of the things that opened that whole up.
Yeah,
right?
well, but there was nothing about repealing Glass-Steagall that meant that you had to stop doing oversight and regulation. There was nothing about Glass-Steagall that said you had to create huge pools of subprime mortgage debt and slap AAA ratings on it. What we had was a systemic failure of oversight, of transparency, and of rampant greed that has hurt middle-class people. And I think what's wrong is to look at that and say, so therefore, we need to go after the middle class. We need to end programs like Medicare. We're going to block grant Medicaid and send it back to the states. That would destroy the budget of New York. Bill Clinton said the other night, If the Congresswoman wants to do that, she could just, Andrew Cuomo is never going to balance the budget in New York. What we've got to do is what has worked in the past. And what has worked in the past is you bet, allowing the free market engine to create all the wealth and all the innovation and all the creativity it can. I think we did that pretty well in the 90s, but to keep an eye on it, to make sure it doesn't get out of hand, and to ask the folks at the very top to help us move through this period of budget crisis. Everybody's going to have to pitch in,
Okay.
and that's what we did before.
Yeah, I want to give her a chance to respond.
What your proposal means for Medicare recipients who do not qualify for the grandfathering, 55 and under, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
What is, in fact, so the folks out there understand, what is, in fact, your vision for that? Is it this voucher system that has a,
No.
a certain connotation or not?
No, thank you, Barry. I'll be happy to talk about the plan that we've proposed. First of all, before I proceed, $5 trillion, that's a bogus figure. That's not realistic numbers at all. And we can talk more about that. But when we talk about the future of Medicare, we have to put the $716 billion that the health law that Mr. Maloney has expressed his support for takes out of Medicare. That has to go back in right away. We know we have to do that to shore up Medicare. When we look at the future, we all have to have a mature conversation about the challenges we face. So for folks like me, folks who are under 55, what we've proposed is that there be premium support, which is not a voucher. A voucher means, you get a check and you go out and buy insurance. What we're talking about is combining the power of millions of seniors by region across the country. Millions of seniors will have the negotiating power. Medicare will do this, but Medicare will have the negotiating power of millions of seniors across the country so that they can define plans, compete. Insurers will have to compete for Medicare's business, which has worked very well in Medicare Part D and in Medicare Advantage. Insurers compete for Medicare's business, and then seniors will receive support for that plan or be able to participate in traditional Medicare. There would be no changes for any seniors within 10 years of this becoming law. So our current seniors don't even need to think about it. Anybody over 55 doesn't need to think about it. But those of us who are in our younger years, this is a good proposal for us to talk about. Get premium support, have a guaranteed plan, but use the combined power of seniors in the marketplace where choice and competition thrive. Instead of having what this administration has, and of course the Congress led by Congresswoman Pelosi did in 2010 and what Mr. Maloney has supported. Their bend the cost curve approach to Medicare is the Independent Payment Advisory Board. And what IPAB, that's what it's called, is going to do for our seniors is limit their access or eliminate their access to care because they're going to cut reimbursements to providers. And what that's going to mean, and our seniors understand that, what that's going to mean is that our doctors, our hospitals will not be able, they simply will not be able to afford to provide the care that our seniors are relying on. We want to eliminate that board. We want to keep that care going. We want to put Americans back to work in a revived economy so that we can have Medicare shored up now.
Okay.
Can I say a word about that?
I wanted to. We entered.
Medicare is a very important question.
Just let me frame it. All right. We kind of moved into the Affordable Care Act debate there a little bit. That's all I wanted to say. So we just kind of move into that and
sure.
Kind of say what you want to say. But that's where we ended up. So go ahead.
No problem. Look, that was a very long answer. And if you're wondering what it means is what the Tea Party wants to do is cap your Medicare benefit. If you're 54 or under, they're going to cap your benefit. And the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, Congresswoman, said that would cost seniors $6,400 more a year. Why? Because healthcare costs keep going up. And if you have a cap benefit, the bill's going on you. And that's a fact. That's what it does. Now, you can call it a voucher. That's what it is. Or you can call it premium support, which I guess means voucher by a different name. It's a capped benefit. That is going to cost seniors. So you have to ask who you trust on this. Do you trust a Bill Clinton Democrat to make the necessary reforms over the long term, or do you trust the Tea Party that has made very clear that is coming after Medicare, and it wants to turn it over to private insurers. They tried this with Social Security not long ago. Now, on this Affordable Care Act stuff, the Congresswoman keeps trying to lay that on my doorstep. As Bill Clinton said at the convention, Congresswoman, it takes a lot of brass to accuse a guy of doing something you did. I mean, you voted twice to take $700 billion out of Medicare. That was in both of the Ryan budgets that you voted for. You're the only one here who's had a chance to do that, and that's how you voted. I've said repeatedly that I think that was a mistake. Now,
Hold on, would you have supported the affordable? Would you have voted against it?
There are things I like, and there are things I don't.
You had to vote one way or another. You voting for it or against it?
Listen, no, that's not right. I wasn't in Congress, and let me tell you what I support.
Hold on, no, it's beyond the See, a hypothetical would be. Hold on, just humor me, okay? Okay, thanks. A hypothetical would be me asking you something that might happen. This is something that happened. We could look through all of every page of that bill, and you can make a determination whether you would have supported it or not. So would you have voted for it?
It's a backward hypothetical, and it doesn't allow for being in Congress and being part of those conversations and being able to shape that debate.
So you're not going to answer. You're not going to give us an answer.
I'm going to tell you exactly what I support and what I don't support. I think that's about as honest I can get. Let's be.
I think you
specific.
Actually, I think you could honestly answer the question. I mean, you're
sitting in the chair. That's the bill. You voting on it? Yes or no? Which way?
I'm telling you that there are things I support and there are things I don't. And if you guys want to know which they are,
but
that's true.
But she ended up voting one way
Sean,
or
that's
the
true
other,
in almost any comprehensive bill that you're going to have to vote on. You're going to like things about it, and you're not going to like it. So we're asking you, would you vote for it or not?
And when I am in Congress, I will come back here and I will say to you guys, if I'm lucky enough to be there, why I supported things and why I didn't. Let me tell you what I support about the Affordable Care Act. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll tell you what I don't support.
Your campaign.
We can be as specific as you want. I think that here's what I think is good. I think it's good that we're closing the prescription donut hole for seniors. I think that's very important. The Congresswoman would reopen that. And guys like Gary Lang, who was a railroad engineer for 37 years, who I met at the Yankee Clipper, will fall into the donut hole after 3 months because he's got diabetes and he can't afford his medication. The Congresswoman and the Tea Party wants to reopen the donut hole. I think that's wrong. I think that's a good reform. I think it's great that the Affordable Care Act banned discrimination against women in health insurance premiums. Before that was allowed. Now it's not. They would go back. I would not. I think it's very important that kids can stay on their parents' insurance policies for a few years. There's a lot of kids coming out of college who can't get a job, who have too much debt. I think it's terrific that they can be on their health insurance policies for a little longer. That part of the Affordable Care Act would also be repealed under the Congresswoman's plan. I support all those things. I do not support, and I have said repeatedly, that I do not support the Independent Payment Advisory Board, so we agree about that, Congresswoman. I do not support the $700 billion cut that you voted for twice. I do not support the 1099 provision that would have had everybody file a form for $600 in expenses.
Okay, but hold on. 1099 is being repealed, and if you're not
right.
supporting the Medicare part of it, where that's supposed to drive. That's supposed to be the cost-cutting curve that you were talking about earlier. That's what.
No, that's not what I was talking about.
But
No.
that's what they're saying,
No,
right?
no,
So
that's
if you
totally
wouldn't vote
different.
for that, where would you get that money?
Well, I just told you. What the Congresswoman voted for twice was to take $700 billion out of Medicare. She has the temerity to accuse me of doing that when I wasn't in Congress. But what I told you is that if we negotiated prescription drug prices with drug companies, if we use the market power of Medicare to negotiate durable medical goods, all of the things that hospitals bill you too much for, and the system too much for, and we used better approaches like Crystal Run in Orange County to bring down the cost of care and improve incomes, then we could achieve these savings over time in smarter, better ways. That is not the same as the plan the Congresswoman has supported, which is to destroy the current Medicare system.
I want to go a little further on this, but I want to give you a chance. Is there anything quickly that you wanted to say about this?
John, I've said over and over again, and I've voted twice to repeal, in its entirety, repeal and replace the 2010 health law. In repealing that 2010 health law, those $716 billion go back to Medicare, which is where they belong. So I have voted to replace those dollars into Medicare. And we need to have a plan that accommodates the great goals of the 2010 health law, including making sure that everybody has access to insurance that they can afford and that they can take with them from job to job, including those aspects that we like about the Medicare provisions. I think it's great to keep the donut hole closed. We can do that, but we have to do it with a plan that will work for the American people.
You've often touted the Healthy Indiana plan,
Yeah.
And as a plan. I want to talk a little bit about that plan. It's my understanding it covers 50,000 people, so we're not talking about a huge
Right.
sample in terms of
They'd
America.
like to expand it, but they're not going to be able to.
And then
with
it doesn't cover vision, it doesn't cover dental, and it doesn't cover maternity. And as your
They
opponent
have an alternative plan for that.
and as your opponent pointed out in a recent debate, that some stimulus money, the package that you were against, was actually used to strengthen it, to actually help fund the system. So that would be a model that certainly, while laudable in some ways, certainly would have some holes that could be picked apart. What do you say to someone who would do that like I just did?
Well, let's look at the fundamentals of the Healthy Indiana plan. The idea was, and this was a nonpartisan thing, Governor Daniels, a Republican, worked with the Democratic legislature to craft a plan to help make their Medicaid costs easier for the state to afford. They have to help those folks. Make it easier to afford, but still let them have the power of making decisions, rather than, and this is the same with the Affordable Care Act, we concentrate, that law concentrates the power in Washington. In Indiana, they decided to respect the people. So let patients and doctors make the decisions. How? Let Medicaid recipients and state employees have health savings accounts. State helped Medicaid recipients to fund those savings accounts, largely through a cigarette tax. Every state can determine that on its own. What they found was that people would buy catastrophic insurance policies to cover the big things, and then they would work together with their doctors on making sure that the price of regular medical care, routine visits, routine medications, routine diagnostic procedures, x-rays, things like that, to make sure that the costs were reasonable, that they could afford.
But what about it's not comprehensive. There's important things like maternity
care,
that it doesn't
provides
cover. And the fact that it needed stimulus money to prop itself up.
Well, I would say, look, the state of Indiana, Governor Daniels is a smart guy. The state of Indiana was offered stimulus funding. Lots of states did use that funding. Mm-hmm. What we have to look at is, how do we get to a future where we can afford to have the kind of care and insurance that we want to have, and still leave decision-making power
go ahead, quickly.
with patients and doctors?
At the Chamber event, you talked about your replacement for Affordable Health Care Act. You said a small surcharge to help folks with pre-existing conditions.
That's right.
What does that mean? Would there be coverage? Would people with pre-existing conditions be able to get insurance, is my question.
Yes, that's the goal. We have to, the goal is the right goal, to help everybody afford insurance. And there was some great work, actually it was done, the University of Minnesota, the Manhattan Institute have studied this issue, because this is something that requires a thoughtful approach. And what they've found is that if you make insurance easier to afford in the state of New York, by opening up the insurance marketplace, making health savings accounts easy for people to set up, and also by helping with the cost of defensive medicine, which the Affordable Care Act didn't even touch. But if you do those things and make insurance easier to afford, then if the state of New York, for example, just put a very small, I think it's $5 per policy per month surcharge on the state's part on insurance policies that were sold in the state of New York, then they would be able to fund a high-risk pool to provide insurance to people with pre-existing conditions.
Would an insurance company be able to turn down someone with a pre-existing condition? Or would they have to rely on this high-risk pool?
If you open up the marketplace to insurers from across the country, then you get, as we have in Medicare Part D.
Sounds iffy to me, I'm going to be honest with you. It doesn't sound like a definitive yes. That if I'm somebody with a pre-existing condition...
No, you would be able to have care, absolutely. I mean, the state of New York right now has, every state has its own way of approaching this challenge, and that's okay. That honors the culture and the people within a state. There's nothing wrong with that. The state of Massachusetts decided on a certain way of approaching their health care. The state of Indiana did another. I will tell you, the state of Indiana, if you look at the vote on Healthy Indiana, state employees had an option. They didn't have to participate in Healthy Indiana. They went from 4% participation the first year, which was, I think, 2007, 2008, to nearly 100% participation now. Okay. People have saved. The state has saved. And the health care that's been provided has been completely satisfactory.
Sean, I want to get your response to this. I also want to add one thing because I kind of poke holes in Healthy Indiana there, but I also want to swing it the other way and say
Sure.
we have the benefit and full disclosure where Poughkeepsie Journal is owned by the Gannett Corporation, which owns a number of newspapers across the country, including the Indianapolis Star. I had a chance to talk to the editorial board about this very issue because it kept coming up, and I wanted to find out, well, what are they saying in Indiana? And actually, they're fairly supportive. They said that that the model, whether it would work across the country, who knows, but that to totally diss this model, in their view, was really not the way to go. They've been fairly supportive, and they think that that there is some good benefits to it. So, what do you say to that?
What I say is what Barry said is very important, is that insurance companies shouldn't be able to deny people. What the plan does in Healthy Indiana, it's the same thing the Tea Party wants to do in Washington. It caps the benefit. It caps your benefit. And if you cap benefits, you can shift health care costs onto regular people. And you say, oh, well, we'll have an $1,100 deductible. That plan has an $1,100 deductible. How many families do you think can spend $1,100 out of their weekly budget? Maybe that's not a big deal to some people. That's crushing to a lot of people, particularly the people it's supposed to help. Doesn't include maternity services. Well, that's a big deal. I mean, and it would have gone broke, Congresswoman, without the stimulus that you so proudly oppose. So the fact of the matter is if you prop it up and the alternative is doing nothing, I'm sure there's some things to be said for it. But we don't have to use a broken model like that for the rest of the country. I think if you look at the three major healthcare areas that the Congresswoman has had the opportunity to vote on, what are they? Ending the guaranteed benefit of Medicare, shifting costs onto our seniors. Block granting Medicaid for our elderly and our poor, sending it back to the states. That'd be a $20 to $30 billion shot below the waterline for the budget of the state of New York. That's devastating for the state of New York. No New York congressional member should ever support that. She voted for it. So we're talking about Tea Party priorities. And thirdly, the most mean-spirited thing, defunding Planned Parenthood, even though it's already illegal and has been for years to use federal taxpayer funds for abortion. They just want to cripple Planned Parenthood because this is a Tea Party obsession. If you take those three things in tandem, it would have a devastating outcome on the health of Hudson Valley families.
You're saying do nothing. The Republicans, part of what they have been saying all along is that several things you can do. You could let insurance be purchased across state lines. You could provide incentives for health savings accounts, and you could cap medical malpractice suits. All those seem, legitimate issues that could have been folded into the Affordable Health Care Act, or should, since you won't tell us how you would vote on that, would you support any one of those three things going forward?
Well, let's be fair. I told you exactly what I supported and what I didn't, and we can do this all day. I think the fact of the matter is we should fix everything that's broken. I'll give you some more. I'm very concerned.
Well, what about those three things that I just said?
I'd put everything on the table, and
putting them on the table? We could put anything on the table. Would you support any of them or not support?
Well, I don't know what your proposal is. You named three very broad subjects,
right,
and I'm willing to say I'll talk about them.
Okay.
So if you ask me, I'll give you my position. I'm trying to be very clear here, and I think I've been very specific about exactly the provisions I support and exactly the ones I do not support.
Well, I know, but that doesn't mean
that.
Hold on, it doesn't mean you named every issue under the sun. So I was just throwing some other ones out there to see if you thought about them. And
sure. Look, I think that Republicans and Democrats can work together in good faith on this, and I have no doubt that the Affordable Care Act got all kinds of things wrong. Right? It's a huge piece of legislation. And there's going to be things we've got to fix. I'm very concerned about the impact on small business. I want to make sure we get those thresholds right. I want to make sure we're phasing it in the right way. I think we got to watch that like a hawk. And if it's too fast or the thresholds are wrong, we should change them. I think I named some of the other things I think that are mistakes. There's no reason to believe that in a piece of legislation this comprehensive, everything's going to be right. So let's mend it. But we shouldn't end it. We should fix what's wrong and keep moving forward. Now my opponent voted 31 times last year to repeal it. CBS News said that cost taxpayers $50 million because this is a political football in Washington. I think we should move forward, stop fighting, and start working again.
Okay. One other thing I just want to say is Sarah gets in the room. If they could just, everyone just relax. We're almost done with the interview, and we'll move on from there. Nan, go ahead. Anything you want to say?
Well, there's so much there to cover and so much obfuscation, but I have voted consistently to try to help our small businesses and American families who are struggling under the cost of living now, the crushing burden of unemployment. Again, this wake up and smell the coffee. We have a Hudson Valley that has taxes that are too high, unemployment that is way beyond where it should be, regulations like the 2010 health law that are crushing our small businesses and making hiring impossible. I hear this over and over again. Their health care costs have risen, not fallen, and they're expecting more. There's a bunch of new taxes coming. And energy prices are out of control. We have to have an approach that understands that the strength of this country is in letting sensible Americans do the things they do best, not putting the control in Washington. Mr. Maloney wants to take more from you. If you're a small business, he's going to take more from you in taxes. He's going to continue the provisions, the costly provisions of the 2010 health law. He is going to make sure that regulations are more than you can bear, because this is his approach. He wants the federal government to have that.
We've covered. Hold on. We have covered. I think anyone would watch this tape, and I'm certainly going to watch it again. Will come that you guys really have covered. You have covered some of this ground.
You might need to get out more.
Touche. My wife says
life's too short, man. You got to take your kids to the movies.
Touche. I'm working on that. And you guys can help me here by let's moving forward, because I think some of the ground we've covered. But I want to. There's a few things I want to get to before we wrap up. This question during the one debate that I did see before this, you seem to struggle over this question of when exactly you've paid taxes in this home. Apparently, you purchased in Cold Spring. So could you kind of revisit that for us a little bit?
Well, sure. I bought a house in April. I believe we closed on May 1st.
So you closed on this house?
I bought a new house. We closed on May 1st. I own it, and I pay the property taxes at closing, just like anybody. And I pay my property taxes every year. I paid property taxes every year on the home I own in Sullivan County on the other side of the river for the last 16 years. I've been in the Mid-Hudson region for a long time, and my family's business is throughout Orange County. We build green, friendly modular homes in Port Jervis and elsewhere, and do construction and real estate all throughout the region. This is something you do. You launch a personal attack when you don't want to defend your record, and that's what I think the Congresswoman has been doing. Instead of a positive vision of the future, instead of saying, here's how we're going to balance the budget the right way, here's how we're going to grow the economy, what she wants to do is call me names, fill up your mailboxes with negative stuff, and instead, disguise her own record, which is to destroy the guaranteed benefit of Medicare and to defund Planned Parenthood. So it's just politics.
Okay. Quickly, you have anything to say about this? And I have one other question, and
well,
I'm going to wrap up and see if other people have questions.
If you hate getting a lot of mail in your mailboxes, I do sympathize with you, because Mr. Maloney's been the beneficiary of millions of dollars, including from George Soros and his son, going into negative mail about me. Negative mail that actually levels a lot of charges, labels, and partisan bomb throwing that don't in any way reflect my record of service to the Hudson Valley. It is important as an issue of character and of commitment to know how somebody has actually come to care about this Hudson Valley. Mr. Maloney, in fact, did not register the deed for the property he bought in Cold Spring until last Thursday, under pressure from us following the debate on Y&N. Now, if you don't register a deed, you have to know what that means, folks. If you didn't register a deed, that means that you can just shred it and get rid of it if things don't go your way. When you move into a district just to be here to run for Congress, then you're treating this district, where I have lived and loved the people here and raised a family here and cared for patients here for 24 years. When you come into a district because this is something on your political plan.
I need to say something about Congressman. You are in a city that was not in your district. That is in your district. You've never lived or worked in.
Hold on,
excuse me. You've never lived or worked in Poughkeepsie. Newburgh is in your district. You've never lived and worked in Newburgh. I don't think you've ever lived or worked in Orange County, where my family's had a business for the last 16 years, where we've paid where we've created jobs, or we've helped people construct new homes. So this is politics, and you should be ashamed of yourself. The fact of the matter is, you know darn well that I have longstanding connections to this district. And this kind of name calling is just because you can't explain why you want to defund Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
You can't explain why you want to end Medicare.
You guys done, I think, fairly well in terms of staying on the issues and off of some of those other points that I think you've already gotten out there. I want to, it's one other question. We had some reader submitted questions. I was able to fold one, hopefully the reader believes so, in the Affordable Care Act discussion, but I wanted to do another one, which is, and Nan, I'll start with you, which is the question of, you're basically running this with the support of your party, and the party has a platform. So could you point out places, if any, where you disagree with your party, or have worked with the other side, or have disagreed with the platform?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's very important to think about working with the other side. In fact, at the YNN debate, there was a telling moment. In the lightning round, we were both asked if we'd ever voted for someone from a member of the other party, and I said yes, and I have many times, and Mr. Maloney said no. And I think that's a material example of how I certainly embrace folks from both sides of the aisle. It's very important to bring everybody into this process. And I have many friends here in the city of Poughkeepsie and in Newburgh and in Middletown, and these are places that have been familiar to me for long before this election. I'm a co-founder of the Common Ground Caucus. That was January of 2011, right after we were elected. I accepted an invitation from my good friend across the aisle, David Cicilline, to co-found that caucus to bring Democrats and Republicans together. I co-sponsor legislation with Democratic members, including the Pace Protection Act I mentioned. I've worked across the aisle as a key negotiator on behalf of the House majority with the Democratic Senate majority to make sure that we had an extension of the payroll tax holiday to help all our hardworking Americans and our families, extend that through 2012, extend Medicare reimbursements through 2012, extend federal unemployment help through 2012. I was able to work across the aisle successfully with members of the other party to get things done.
Are there parts of the platform that you disagree with?
Absolutely. I run as Nan. So I run on what I'm talking about with you, which is that I do want to see your burdens lifted.
What specifically would you cite that you disagree with?
Well, it's a matter of supporting the good goals of a Republican platform. That's the crucial issue. That's all we're talking about.
So there's nothing specific that you'd want to mention?
You can look at my record in terms of how I vote on the environment, on social issues. Clearly, my perspective and my spectrum is going to be different than those who march in lockstep with the party. That's why I'm in the middle of the rankings, 220 out of 435. And I'm proud of that. I'm an independent thinker. I'm an independent voice. I represent everyone here.
Okay. Same question. If you want to talk to a little bit about her, where she's been on that's fine. But we would also like to know where, if you can project, where you think that you might not align yourself with the Democratic Party.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's remarkable that the Congresswoman could not name one example in the Tea Party Congress that she disagrees with. I mean, this is the most conservative Congress of my lifetime. And if Congresswoman seems to think Congress is working great, everything's going terrific, and if you just join some caucus, that counts for something. This Congress is broken, Congresswoman. It's not working. We've seen it. It's been a disgrace. And if you can't name one thing you disagree with, well, I think that speaks volumes. I'll give you an example of where I disagree with my own party. I think there should be massive private investments in infrastructure. I'd like to see private dollars invested alongside public dollars. I created the Public-Private Partnership Commission in New York to get projects like the walkway over the Hudson right here, to get projects like the Tappan Zee Bridge moving. The Congresswoman likes to take credit for that. She hasn't brought one penny back to New York for the Tappan Zee Bridge. In fact, she's against earmarks, so it'd be pretty hard to do it, wouldn't it? So the fact of the matter is I disagree with my party on that. I disagree with the president on Afghanistan. I think we should get our kids out even faster than the announced timeline. The Congresswoman has repeatedly supported no deadline for Afghanistan. We'll just keep fighting. That's what she said in 2010. And that I think is wrong. I think we've been in Afghanistan long enough. I think we can fight the terrorist threat smarter and cheaper and better with intelligence, with drones, with special forces. But we do not need tens of thousands of American kids on the ground in Afghanistan. So I'm a Bill Clinton middle of the road guy. I've built a business in the private sector. I've created hundreds of jobs right here in New York. I'm not going down to Washington to be some rubber stamp for anybody, and I'm sure not going to keep voting with this Tea Party. And the idea that she couldn't name one thing she opposes, well, that's just shocking to me.
Okay. We're going to go to closing, but just make sure no one else had any questions. I think we're okay. Nan, I believe you would go first.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Folks, I'm proud to be rooted in the Hudson Valley for 24 years as a doctor, as a mother, as someone who started and grew her small business here. I'm proud to have served as your member of Congress, going around and getting to know every community I serve and every community I hope to serve. It means a lot to me to be able to represent your values and to do it in a way that does reach across the aisle and that is open-minded and that keeps the big picture in mind. Balance and sustainability, the perspective that says, look, we can't afford what Mr. Maloney is going to propose for you, which is that taxes be increased, that regulations continue to crush our small businesses, that our energy prices will rise. We cannot afford to go down that path. Every vote I have taken in behalf of our Hudson Valley, I've taken because I have felt it has made sense for our people here, for our taxpayers, for our seniors who are relying on Medicare and Social Security for the future, for everyone here who needs a job, and for folks who need that safety net preserved. We need to grow our economy. We need to grow opportunity. I've proven I can work across the aisle to get good things done for the Hudson Valley. We have so much more to do together, and I'd be privileged to have your vote.
Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to the Poughkeepsie Journal. And thank you to all of you. Look, 2 years ago, Congresswoman Hayworth went to Washington and said she would be just what she said now, an independent voice for the Hudson Valley. But what did she do? What were her priorities? We now have the record. The record is that she's been voting with the Tea Party every step of the way. She wants to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare. That's a Tea Party priority. She wants to do that to give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires. You heard her say today that she rules out any sacrifice from those at the very top. She wants to defund Planned Parenthood. She has no good reason for that. She'll tell you that it's because she doesn't want taxpayer funds used for abortion, but that's already illegal under federal law. That's a canard. The fact of the matter is this is a mean-spirited Tea Party priority. So it's one thing to come before the voters and to make sugary promises about being bipartisan or to work across the aisle. But when you go down to Washington and you vote, time after time, with the Tea Party, against Hudson Valley families, against the state of New York, trying to block grant Medicaid, send it back to us, voting against our kids, trying to cut Pell Grants and make it harder for kids to go to college and harder to pay back their loans. I think college costs too much. We should allow kids to pay for college through community service or military service, not cutting Pell Grants. Time and time again, when Hurricane Irene hit, the farmers in Orange County know what happened. The Times-Herald Record reported what happened. She said, let's cut the budget before we help our neighbors. Man, that is the most extreme view I've ever heard of how to respond to a hurricane. But it is this Tea Party fever that's taken over Washington. If you give me your voice and your vote, we'll do what we did in the Clinton administration. We'll balance the budget the right way. We'll keep investing in schools, in innovation, in infrastructure, in research. And we will do it all together. We will not pit one group of Americans against another. We will keep the promise of Medicare. We will protect Planned Parenthood. And we will protect Pell Grants. And we will grow this economy together. We've done this before. We had the greatest economic growth in our lifetimes when we did what I just said. And we put 1 million people to work in New York with good jobs at rising wages. We can do that again. But we've got to turn the page on the Tea Party. I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank you both for coming. This is a very lively and engaging discussion. I certainly learned a lot, so I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean.